I've always liked to think of myself as a pretty laid-back guy. I've got a bit of land out in Red Rock, tucked away far enough that you wouldn't expect anyone to care about what I do. It's quiet, peaceful, just the way I like it. But you know, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It all started on a Thursday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a routine inspection flight. Nothing big, just flying over some rural infrastructure, making sure the survey markers were still in place, checking the fields for any damage. I had my Bell 505 helicopter parked in the open area behind my house, blades slowing to a quiet hum, just about to touch down on the legal landing zone I'd mapped out and had FAA clearance for. I was trying to wrap up the day when I noticed her, Karen, the HOA president, standing in the middle of my driveway. One slipper on, hair in full chaos mode, waving a clipboard in the air like she was going to take me to court over something. It was absurd, and in that moment, I had a sinking feeling in my gut that my day was about to go sideways. I wasn't expecting her. I wasn't even sure why she was there. I figured maybe she was just trying to get a little fresh air, or maybe she wanted to talk about some neighborhood-ish, who knows. But when she opened her mouth, it was clear this wasn't a simple neighborly chat. "This is a violation of HOA Policy 7.3, she screeched, pointing up at my helicopter as if I'd just flown a fighter jet through her leave-wying room. "No large vehicles on lawns." I stood there, my flight headset still around my neck, trying not to burst out laughing. But she wasn't kidding. She was furious. I could feel the heat of her gaze from across the driveway. I couldn't make this up if I tried. "Karen," I said, keeping it calm. "This is my helipad. It's registered with the FAA. I have clearance, and this space is legally mapped out as a landing zone. This is all above board." But she wasn't hovwing it. She practically slammed a notice in my chest. Bold red letters across the top. 72 hours to remove, or we tow. Tow? Tow? As if they could just slap a boot on my skid and drag my helicopter down the street like it was some broken-down car. The absurdity of it made me want to laugh, but I had to keep my composure. That was the moment I realized she had no idea who she was dealing with. See, I wasn't just some guy who parked a helicopter in his backyard. I was a licensed pilot, a legal owner of a helipad, and had been flying for years. This wasn't some small mistake that could be wiped away with a quick complaint. No, this was about to become something far bigger. Now, let me back up a little bit and tell you how I ended up in this situation in the first place. When I moved into Red Rock a couple of years ago, I wasn't looking to make waves. My late uncle had left me his helicopter, the Bell 505, along with a small parcel of land that was attached to the house. The land was perfect for what I had in mind, enough open space to legally set up a helipad, no need to deal with traffic into town, and the freedom to fly without worrying about city congestion. My uncle had run aerial survey missions for years, and when I inherited it, I took the time to make sure everything was in place: permits, noise compliance forms, FAA coordination, everything I needed to make it legit. I wasn't using it every day, just for the occasional short hop or surveying trip when traffic got unbearable. For the most part, everyone around here thought it was cool. The kids would wave when I landed. Some even asked to take pictures in the cockpit. The whole thing felt like a little slice of heaven. Well, so everyone saw except for Karen. She'd always been a stickler for rules. And I mean always. One year, she fined someone for hanging Christmas lights on November 1st because it ruined the neighborhood VY Sewell Harmony. She called it that saw VY Sewell Harmony saw. Her reputation was built on control and enforcement. If there was a rule, she followed it to the letter, and if there wasn't one, she'd make one up. The first time I saw her after I moved in was when I was landing my chopper after a routine flight. I was finishing up the approach when I saw her barreling down the street toward my house, bathrobe flapping behind her like a superhero cape of petty authority. I figured she was just another concerned neighbor, so I walked over to greet her, still wearing my flight headset, trying to play it cool. "Everything all right?" I asked, giving her a polite nod. She didn't even give me a chance to finish before she started shouting at me about how helicopters didn't belong in residential ambience, and how my landing was disruptive to the neighborhood's tranquility. I tried to calm her down, explaining that I had FAA clearance, that the land was legally designated for such use, and that the noise was no worse than a lawnmower. But she didn't want to hear any of it. She cut me off mid-sentence and demanded that I show her proof. At that point, I was honestly just trying to get through the conversation without getting too irritated. So, I calmly walked her over to my house, grabbed a laminated copy of my pilot's license, my air traffic waiver for low-flight approaches, and even the HOA's own charter that didn't prohibit aircraft on private property. I handed her the papers and watched as she scanned them, her face wrinkling in confusion. "Well, this still doesn't look right," she muttered, before storming off in a huff, without so much as a thank you. I thought that was the end of it. I thought wrong. The next morning, I found an actual printed HOA violation notice in my mailbox. It was signed and dated, accusing me of parking unauthorized machinery on my lawn. The comments section included something about propeller-related damage to community tranquility and how my helicopter's wind turbulence was interfering with flower beds. I nearly spit out my coffee. This wasn't a joke. This was a full-on campaign. That afternoon, I noticed my mailbox filled with HOA newsletters, and to my disbelief, there was an entire section titled SAW, Airborne Threats to Neighborhood Safety. SAW included a grainy picture of my helicopter, angled just enough to make it look like it was about to attack the HOA clubhouse. Things started to escalate faster than I could keep up with. Karen wasn't just complaining anymore. She was rallying the HOA board, and soon, I had Ron, the poor guy who looked like he just wanted to retire already, measuring distances from my helipad to nearby homes like he was preparing for an artillery strike. And then came the most ridiculous part. Karen stood at the edge of my property with a camera and started filming every landing I made, narrating each one with phrases like, "Note the aggression in the descent pattern. A clear threat to shrubs and pets." I swear, I was waiting for her to say that my helicopter was going to start robbing houses next. But instead, she took it a step further and started telling the neighbors that helicopters attract crime. I nearly choked when I heard that. And then came the HOA removal notice. 72 hours. If I didn't remove my helicopter, they were going to tow it. Tow it? Like they could just slap a boot on it and drag it off with a pickup truck? It was honestly laughable if it wasn't so stupid. I sent them a cease and desist letter, copied the FAA and my lawyer. I assumed that would put an end to it, but Karen doubled down. She called for an emergency HOA meeting to review local air usage ethics. At the meeting, Karen presented a homemade slideshow titled SAW Operation Sky Menace. She pointed at my helicopter as if it were some kind of UFO and asked the room, "Is this what we want in our skies? Noise, danger, and spinning blades of chaos." A couple of the neighbors chuckled under their breath, and one even whispered, "I kind of like the helicopter." But Karen wasn't going to let it go. She declared the entire matter a threat to community cohesion and demanded a vote to enforce the removal order. I reminded them, as calmly as I could, that airspace was regulated by the federal government and that they had zero legal standing to enforce flight policy. Her response? "This isn't about law. It's about neighborhood spirit." The board hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Ron raised his hand and said, "Maybe they should consult a lawyer." Karen shot him a glare so sharp, he nearly put his hand back down. Still, they agreed to hold off on enforcement for now. But Karen wasn't done. The next day, a tow truck showed up at my house. The driver looked at my helicopter, then at his flatbed, then back at me and said, "Yeah, I'm not touching that." I gave him a bottle of water and he left, muttering something about crazy HOA ladies and evaluation. That was it. I knew the next move had to be mine.